next thing we're going to focus on is to get the player to move around at the bottom of the screen with the paddle. And we're going to need to put in some code, definitely a lot of code, and some labels to kind of help us along the way to do some debugging. So let's go ahead and put the labels in now. Just going to throw some labels up here at the top. So in your toolbox, just kind of drag a few up towards the top of the screen. Don't worry about changing the text now, because we're going to change it anyways during playtime. And we'll might as well do it now. We're going to throw in a timer. And what this is going to do is allow us to run events continuously with this timer. A lot of games are made in Visual Basic using a timer. So you can either double click on it or just drag it into the form. It's not actually going to show. It should make a separate container down here, and it kind of houses this object. It's part of the form, but you don't actually see it, so they just kind of list them down here. There's some other different controls that do that as well. All right, go ahead and select the timer down here once you click it, and in the properties panel here, we're just going to change some things. Right off the bat, we want to make enabled true. Okay, so we'll change that. We want to make the interval a little bit smaller, so we'll make the frequency of events 15 milliseconds. And I think that's it for that. Okay, so we'll leave that there. And now we'll go into our code view. So if you don't have your code view open already, right-click somewhere in Design View and then View Code. Your keyboard shortcut is F7, so you can press that as well. All right, should open up a different tab right up here. So we got our Properties tab. We're not really going to use that right now. We have our Design tab and then our Code tab. The first thing I want to show you guys is to look at the layout or the coordinate system that goes along with Visual Basic, because it's a little bit different than Scratch, what we used before. So the first thing we're going to do is code our label here to display the output of where our mouse is on the screen, so I can show you. So what I want you to do is double click on the timer. What that's going to do is add in a timer tick event. So anytime the timer ticks down in milliseconds, it's going to run this event, which is super, super fast. A millisecond is quite fast. So what we're going to do is put in a couple, we're going to put in a command that displays the mouse position. So we're going to grab label 1, and we're going to change the text property of that object to display the mouse position. So just so we know what it is, let's put in a string here that tells us it's the mouse position. And then we're going to join it with the actual mouse position. Notice as I start typing, it pops up here. So it says it's the initial class or setting, and it's a read-only property of the mouse. All right, it tells you exactly what it does right down here. It gets the position of the mouse cursor in screen coordinates. That's what we want. And we're going to display that in the label. All right, so you can hit Tab, put that in. So now the issue is, if I click off of this, it's going to throw an error right here. What you can't do, since the text property is a string, you can't, this part's okay, this is a string, but you can't join it with, this is coordinates. Okay, so you can't put numbers with strings unless put a dot, and now we can use our toString command, which basically takes whatever the mouse position is and converts it into a string. All right, so you can only make assignments with the same types of values. All right. I guess I should have showed you what the error looks like down here. I don't have my error list open. If you don't either, go into View. Yours, I think, will be in Other Windows. You'll see Error List. Mine is right up here. So I click on Error List, and it shows it down here. Right now, I don't have any errors. Okay, so make sure it looks like that. And now, if you test the game, click on your debugging, you should get that first label right up here to tell you the mouse coordinates. So as you move around, the coordinates are going to change. Can you find 0, 0? If you follow me up to the top left of my screen, that's where 0, 0 is. Notice it's not even on the form. All right, so it's always represented by wherever or which your 0, 0 is on your monitor, the top left. Now this is the confusing part. The x-axis works well. If you go to the right, notice it's increasing the x. If you go to the left, it's decreasing the x. Okay, well, if you move down, you would think the y value would decrease, but it's actually increasing. Why they did this? I'm not quite sure, but they basically reversed the y-axis. So the higher you get in the y value, the actual lower you are on the screen. And when you go towards the top of the screen, the value decreases. So 0, 0 is always the top left. All right, well, why did I want to show you that? Well, that's because that's going to affect the direction of the ball in the future, but also kind of get an idea of what's happening with the position of the player's paddle as well. All right, so that's enough about that. So what we need is a direction for the player paddle. So we're going to create a variable. Always use your dim keyword, and we're going to call it, I'm going to abbreviate it xdir. Xdir for x direction of the player paddle. And it's going to be of type integer, and we'll first set it to 0. We'll also need a speed variable for how fast the player paddle is going to go. So I'm going to call it player speed. Notice my camel case there. And we'll make it a decimal number because you may want to change this and be quite exact here. So instead of a whole number, we can use a decimal. For now, I'll just put in 4. And that should be enough for now because we're not going to have the paddle move up and down, so we don't need to worry about a y direction. So why did I use a value of 0 here? Well, if you've ever played Xbox and it has an analog joystick on it, as you press the analog joystick, it gives a value between 1 and -1. 1 meaning all the way forward, -1 meaning all the way back. If it's just neutral and you're not touching it, that's a value of 0. So that's why I first set it to 0. That's the same thing that's going to happen here. Even though we are using a keyboard and you're basically only going to have 1 and -1, we want to keep that same gaming aspect in play here. And you'll see as we move on. So the next thing we need to do is trigger a key down event because we're going to move the paddle using key presses. So in order to do that, we're going to use these couple drop boxes here. We're going to go down and select Form 1 events. And then on the right hand side, we're going to scroll down and select, if I can find it, key down. There it is. All right. And now we're going to use a new structure. We could use if blocks, just like we did in Scratch, to go ahead and show the different key presses. If you press W, if you press A, D, so on and so forth. But I'm going to show you a different method, which is actually a little bit more computer friendly. Doesn't take as much processing power. And that's to use a select case block. And what that does is you first give it the different cases that you can select from. So in Visual Basic, we're going to use E to represent the key event, and then we're going to use key code to represent the different keys you can type on the keyboard. Select case, E.keycode. Then we want case keys, D. Okay, so I'm going to use A and D to go left and right. If you want to use the left and right arrow keys, you can certainly do that. So instead of D, you can type in right. That's your right arrow key. But I'm going to keep it at D. And if they press the D key, what we want to do is set the X direction, since that's to the right. And remember our coordinate plane here, 0, 0 is in the top left. So if you move to the right, that's going to increase the X direction. So we want xdir, or the X direction, to be 1. Next, we're going to set up the next case. Let's say if they press the A key, then we want to set the X direction in the opposite direction, which is going to be -1. Okay, so this is our key down event. So we're setting our values, but how does it get back to 0? Well, that's what happens when they lift up on the key. Well, if they lift up on the key, they shouldn't be moving. So we need to basically repeat this, but set these back to 0 on a key up event. All right, so I'm going to get rid of this white space. And I'm going to go back into Form 1 events. Looks like I'm already there. And then here, I'm going to scroll down just a couple and go to key up. As soon as I click on that, bam, pops as in our event for when the key is basically led up. All right, we'll go ahead and put in our code for this. So we're going to use another select case block. Again, we're going to select from the different keys on the keyboard, so E.keycode. So if they let up on the D key, for example, so now we don't want to necessarily set it to 0. We need to check and see if it's down first. And that's the tricky part. If we just put in xdir equals 0, it's going to happen even if we're pressing the A key as well, which is not necessarily what we want. So if the x direction is 1, meaning that it is down, then set it to 0. Okay, meaning they let off of the key. And we'll do the same thing for our A key. Or if you want the left arrow key, use keys.left. So it's up to you. All right, and that's going to be similar here. If xdir is equal to -1, there we go, then xdir is equal to 0. All right, this is not enough to get the paddle to move. If we were to hit start, try and play this, still nothing's going to happen. Okay, so there is one last thing we need to do, and that's in our timer tick event right up here. So what we need to do is take this X direction and actually provide it to the position of the paddle. Okay, now there's an anchor point for every single picture box. The actual position of the picture box is the top left of the object, so right where this top left anchor is. Okay, so that's going to be the same for this block, and that's going to be the same for the ball. So you always want to keep that in mind as you kind of move your objects around. So what we want to do is up in our timer tick event, we're going to go ahead and create a new variable inside of the timer tick event. Notice where my statement is here. And I'm just going to call it a new X for a new X position. This is going to be equal to the, that brings me to a good point. We never did name the object. Okay, we got to go back into design view. We have our 3 objects, right? If I click on it, go into my properties panel, look for the property that says name. Since it has a parenthesis in front of it, it's going to be the top of the list if you're in alphabetical order. And we're going to rename the object. Instead of picture box 3, we want to name it kind of specific to what our object is so we know what it is. So I'm going to say player box. Okay, I'm going to do that for each of my objects while I'm at it. So I'm going to click on my block here. I'm going to call this, and for the ball, I'm going to call this ball box. Block box. There we go. That the way they're all similar. So we got player box, block box, ball blocks. It doesn't really matter what you put here, but you got to remember you're going to use that in code, so you want it to be logical. Like you can put dog here, but you're not going to know what that is when you start typing it out in code. All right, we did make quite a few changes. We got the asterisk. Always save often. So stick to my motto. All right, so we have new X. Now that we renamed it, I called it player box. There we go. So we want to take the player box dot location. Okay, notice as I start typing it pops up like this. If it doesn't pop up for you, you got to check your error list. Make sure you fix your errors so it pops up. Dot X. And we're going to add in the player speed, and we need to multiply the player speed by the X direction. So that's why we set it up before. If they're pressing D, this new X is going to be set in the positive direction. If it's negative, it's going to be set in the negative direction. All right, this isn't quite, now that I'm looking at it, in the right position, because what we're doing is checking the key presses after the timer tick, after the movement. And that should be backwards. So what we're going to do is cut and paste. So use your keyboard shortcuts. I'm going to highlight this private subroutine, Control X to cut, go to enter your code, but before the end class, Control V, and paste it in. Get rid of this white space. And we're so close. All right, we're setting up a variable for our new X position. Not enough to move the paddle around. We have one more line of code. We actually have to set the position. So we're going to grab the player box. There it is, so I can type. Dot location equals, we're going to set it to a new point. Remember the coordinates are all, the movement is all based on coordinate system. And since 0, 0 is in the top left, if we move in the positive direction, that's going to go to the right, negative direction is to the left. All right, the paddle is only going to move left and right, so we really only need to worry about an x coordinate. Notice as soon as I put in this left parenthesis, it tells me how I can put in a new point, either one integer. If I hit this arrow, I can put in a size. If I hit it again, I can put in an x and a y. This is the method that we're going to use. We've already created this new x position. So to prevent typos, I'm going to Control C to copy, Control V to paste. And we're not going to change the y position, so we're going to leave it exactly the same. So we're just going to type in playerbox.location.y. This uses the same exact y coordinates for the player box as it was before. All right, as soon as you click off of that, you should not have any errors. Do not have any errors in my error list. If you do not have the error list and you can't see, go into View. I think yours is going to be in Other Windows. I'm using a newer version, so mine's under Error List. All right, that should be enough to get our key presses going. If you want to save all, you can click right here. However, if you play test, it's going to save it automatically anyways. So I'm going to click Start and test it out. There it is. All right, we got some player movement. All right, we'll leave it at that. See what you guys can do. Fix your errors. Make sure you save it before you leave for the day. All right, we'll see you in the next one.